Could it be possible that somewhere in the deepest recesses of some unknown jungle wilderness in the Congo, plants of sufficient size feast upon even larger prey, even human beings? Imagine saving up all of your money for that one trip you always have wanted to take. Maybe you live in the US and finally have a chance to visit Europe. Maybe vice versa. Maybe your tastes are far more exotic and you wish to see the natural wonders of our very world. The wild places which human beings have yet to tame, where adventure seems to lurk around every corner. Maybe you find yourself in an isolated jungle. You go deep into the forest, wondering with each step whether or not anybody else has ever set foot where you are at this instant. It's an exciting prospect, but inevitably, you will have to use the bathroom. You might have a tour guide and, seeking some privacy, step off the trail, still within earshot, but breaking the line of sight so you can do your business. You find a nice patch of clear ground amidst the vines and leaf litter as a good place as any, and you drop trow, settle in, and try to relax so you can get on with your tour. You're about halfway done when you notice something moving. It's curling up by your foot, long and serpentine. Your first instinct is to freeze. It looks like a snake has made its home here, and then you take a closer look and realize it's not that bad. No, it's much, much worse. Whatever this is, it's too long to be a snake. Now, still frozen, your eyes trace the length of this intruder, quickly finding the tail end before reversing in search of the head. You look and look, daring to turn your head ever so slowly, following the curves up to where they end. This is not a snake. It is a vine, and it is attached to a tree, and it is moving ever so slightly right there before your very eyes. And in moments, the vine whips around your ankle, tightening like a noose, and you're dragged pantsless off your feet and through the heavy cover of dead leaves. And before you know it, you feel the ground fall away behind you, leaving you suspended upside down in midair. You might cry for help, but you've wandered too far. It's too late. And before you, what you thought was once a tree trunk was now split down the middle, revealing a pink maw of jagged thorns as long as your forearm. The vine drags you ever closer, affording a glimpse inside your final resting place. Your last moments will be shared alongside the remains of other victims, the bones of monkeys, deer, even a human skull. The last thing you remember is being wrapped in the cold embrace of the tree trunk, the thorns piercing deep into you. The green of the jungle fades into darkness. You try to batter the interior walls of your newfound prison, but it is useless. You have just fallen victim to a man-eating plant. Sure, it sounds like utter science fiction, but there are some indications such a life form might actually exist on planet Earth. I mean, after all, we all are well acquainted with actual carnivorous plants, from Venus flycatchers to pitcher plants, which eat everything from insects to smaller vertebrates like amphibians. Man-eating plants have fascinated our imagination for over 100 years. These horrifying monstrosities have appeared in the pages of writers like H.G. Wells, have taken to the stage in the musical Little Shop of Horrors, and even graced our screens in the Harry Potter franchise. In Japan, there was once a belief in Juboko, or tree child, a type of yokai spirit that took the form of a tree on a battlefield, drawing strength from the blood that soaked into the earth. Having developed a taste for human fluids, it continued to sustain itself by using its limbs to snag any unsuspecting bystanders, penetrating their flesh with a tube-like protrusion to drain their blood. Now afterwards, the Juboko appeared like any other natural tree, although when it was cut, it leaked not sap but human blood. And the fact of the matter is, we are fascinated by the possibility of predation from the plant kingdom, a deep-seated fear which refuses to go away. Something about the very concept seems so very, very plausible. Now, in the Western scientific discourse, the origins of these fictional stories can be traced back well into the 19th century. Perhaps the most famous man-eating plant appeared in James Williams Buell's 1887 book titled Sea and Land, An Illustrated History of the Wonderful and Curious Things of Nature Existing Before and Since the Deluge. Sweet Christmas, that's a long title. Now, Buell's book, which is presented as a sober, rational work of nonfiction, has fueled more than a century of speculation. I mean, he mentions a species of plant known to grow throughout Central and South America, with related specimen found in Africa along the coastline of the Indian Ocean. Buell wrote this: "Travelers have told us of a plant which they assert grows in Central Africa and also in South America that is not contented with the myriad of large insects which it catches and consumes, but its voracity extends to making even humans its prey. It has a short, thick trunk, from the top of which radiate giant spines, narrow and flexible, but of extraordinary tenaciousness, and the edges of which are armed with barbs or dagger-like teeth. Instead of growing upright or at an inclined angle from the trunk, these spines lay their outer ends upon the ground, and so gracefully are they distributed that the trunk resembles an easy couch with green drapery around it. The unfortunate traveler, ignorant of the monstrous creation which lies in his way, and curious to examine the strange plant, or rest himself upon its inviting stalk, approaches without a suspicion of his certain doom. The moment his feet are set within the circle of the horrid spines, they rise up like gigantic serpents and entwine themselves about him until he is drawn upon the stump, when they speedily drive their daggers into his body, thus completing the massacre. The body is crushed until every drop of blood is squeezed out of it and becomes absorbed by the gore-loving plant, when the dry carcass is thrown out and the horrid trap is set again." Buell went on to claim that not only were these man-eating plants known to the indigenous populations, but that they had been witnessed by European explorers as well. And he tells the story of a gentleman whom he knew who lived in Central America for a number of years and had seen man-eating plants firsthand. According to this informant, the Central American man-eating plant does not leave its spines or vines limp, but instead sends them wildly flailing about in the air, like so many huge serpents in an angry discussion, occasionally darting from side to side, as if striking at an imaginary foe. Whenever its unwitting prey crosses into the path of one of these appendages, the victim is grasped in an unbreakable embrace. The limb closes around its new meal, embedding spines into the victim's body from all directions. Buell compared this method of constriction to the medieval torture device known as the Iron Maiden, a large coffin-like metal cabinet whose interior is lined with spikes. Now, Buell continued with a secondary story from another acquaintance, this time a learned scholar from Colombia, a Dr. Antonio Jose Marquez, a distinguished gentleman of the city of Barranquilla. In describing this wonderful plant to the author, affirms that when excited, it violently agitates its long tentacle-like stems, the edges of which, rasping around upon each other, produce a hissing noise which resembles the Spanish expression "ya te veo," the literal translation of which is "I see you." The plant is therefore known in South America by the name "ya te veo." He further asserts that so poisonous are the stems that if the flesh of any animal be punctured by the sharp barbs, a rapidly eating ulcer immediately forms, for which there is no known antidote, and death speedily ensues. Now, Buell closes the passage with a confession of skepticism, writing that, "I'm not inclined to doubt, not that there is no foundation for such statements as travelers sometimes make about this astonishing growth, but that the facts are greatly exaggerated." Buell's work suggests that the South American ya te veo may be the same, or at least related to, another carnivorous plant allegedly found in Africa. He alluded to one explorer who, while traveling the continent, watched a plant completely devour a native indigenous man. Buell claimed to have heard similar stories from the Fan or Fang people and modern Gabon, Cameroon, and Equatorial Guinea. According to Buell, these people supposedly executed criminals and those convicted of practicing witchcraft by throwing them into the arms of a massive carnivorous flora. Rumors of man-eating plants are most common in Madagascar. In fact, former Michigan Governor Chase Osborne highlighted the nation's terrifying folklore in his 1924 book, Madagascar, Land of the Man-Eating Tree. Talk about a horrible tourism campaign. Osborne's book republished a narrative from an old letter penned in 1874 by Karl Leich, a German traveler addressed to his Polish acquaintance, one Dr. Fidlowski. While Osborne's publication of the letter brought the story to a wider audience, it was by no means new. In fact, the correspondence had been reprinted shortly after Fidlowski received it in newspapers from all over the world, including the October 27, 1874 issue of the South Australian Register. It paints a grim picture not only of the terrifying flora found in Madagascar, but also of a culture of human sacrifice. According to the letter, Carl and another man by the name of Hendrik befriended a mysterious tribe of pygmies known as the Makotos. After earning their trust, the people eventually extended an invitation to the outsiders to attend said ritual. Now, Carl and Hendrik accepted and soon found themselves following the Makoto deep into the jungles. Eventually, they came to a bend in the stream, alongside which stretched a wide clearing. There, in the center, sat the dreaded plant. It was shaped like a pineapple, about 8 feet tall, and seemed to have bark as strong as the finest iron. Now, atop the tree grew 8 leaves, each about a dozen feet long. Carl and Hendrik cautiously examined the plant from a distance, noting unique details about these leaves. The inner side of each appendage seemed covered in spikes or spines like those of a cactus or a teasel. Each leaf terminated in a bowl-like depression atop the tree, which seemed filled with some sort of viscous fluid. From this bowl sprouted another set of fuzzy green tendrils, 7 feet long apiece, sticking out in all directions. These were in addition to a third set of growths, white or transparent, which waved in the air like ball of snakes. The ritual began. From the crowd, the Makotos snatched a young girl, dragging her closer to the tree. The entire crowd raised their voices in a chant as they forced her to climb the trunk towards certain doom. Half willing, half hesitant, she was urged into the bowl of thick fluid, where she took a long drink from the substance that lay pooled at her feet. Carl described what happened next. The slender, delicate palpi, with the fury of starved serpents, quivered a moment over her head. Then, as if instinct with demoniac intelligence, fastened upon her and set in coils round and round her neck and arms. Then, with her awful screams and yet more awful laughter, rose wildly to be instantly strangled down again into a gurgling moan. The tendrils, one after another, like great green serpents with brutal energy and infernal rapidity, rose, retracted themselves, and wrapped her about in fold after fold, ever tightening with cruel swiftness and savage tenacity of anacondas fastening upon their prey. At this point, the leaves, stationary throughout the whole affair, began to twitch, rising up to seal the girl completely in her grisly tomb. All of the plant's appendages tightened, compressing the girl with sickening crunches. As it did so, her blood and bodily fluids began to seep between the leaves, mixing with the sticky sap to flow in reddish-brown streams down the trunk of the tree. The plant was satisfied. There was no immediate threat. Now the second half of the ritual began unfolding before Carl and Hendrik's horrified eyes. The Makoto people rushed towards the placated plant, gathering the fluid in cups in their hands or directly into their mouths. As they drank the mixture of blood and plant juice, the tribe became immediately intoxicated, leaving the scene to devolve into what Carl described as a grotesque and indescribably hideous orgy. Carl and Hendrik excused themselves, fleeing to the peaceful security of their tents. And over the coming days, they revisited the tree, noting how its appendages remained coiled around the girl for 10 days. After the 10th day, the Makoto tribe descended upon the ritual site once more, where the tree now sat open, ready for another victim. And there, at the foot of the tree, sat the girl's white skull, gleaming bright in the sunshine. Chase Osborne presented the letter with more than a hint of agnosticism, writing, "I do not know whether this tigerish tree really exists or whether the blood-curdling stories about it are pure myth and fiction. It is enough for my purpose if its story focuses your interest upon one of the least known spots of the world, Madagascar." However, Osborne also claimed to have seen a similar, smaller plant in his travels to London. He described a specimen housed at the London Horticultural Hall that consumed a mouse after it fell into a hole in its stem. Although Osborne claimed that the plant, which supposedly came from India, had not been classified as belonging to any known botanical species. It sounds very much as if he was describing a pitcher plant, a type of carnivorous plant that we all know exists. Whatever he saw, this incident led Osborne to believe that the existence of the man-eating tree of Madagascar was possible, if not probable. Now, Carl Leich's letter is certainly a riveting tale. It has since come under a great deal of suspicion. However, in his 1955 book, Salamanders and Other Wonders Science, author Willie Ley tried his best to track down not only Carl Leich, but Madagascar's man-eating tree and the Makoto tribe as well. Well, unfortunately, he found no evidence that any of them ever existed, concluding that the facts are pretty clear by now. Of course, the man-eating tree does not exist. There is no such tribe. Whether or not the 1874 Carl Leich letter was a hoax, stories continued to emerge describing plants possessed of a taste for human flesh. One noteworthy account surfaced in the August 27, 1892 issue of the Illustrated London News describing a vampire vine found in Nicaragua. The report offered by Dr. Andrew Wilson read as follows. It appears that a naturalist, a Mr. Dunstan by name, was botanizing in one of the swamps surrounding the Nicaragua lake. The account goes on to relate that, while hunting for specimens, he heard his dog cry out as if in agony from a distance. Running to the spot whence the animal cries came, Mr. Dunstan found him enveloped in a perfect network of what seemed to be fine rope-like tissue of roots and fibers. The plant or vine seemed composed entirely of bare, interlacing stems, resembling more than anything else the branches of a weeping willow, denuded of its foliage, but of a dark, nearly black hue, and covered with a thick, viscid gum that exuded from the pores. Drawing his knife, Mr. Dunstan attempted to cut the poor beast free, but it was with the very greatest difficulty that he managed to sever the fleshy, muscular fibers of the plant. When the dog was extracted from the coils of the plant, Mr. Dunstan saw to his horror that its body was blood-stained, while the skin appeared to be actually sucked or puckered in spots, and the animal staggered as if from exhaustion. In cutting the vine, the twigs curled like living, sinuous fingers of about Mr. Dunstan's hand, and it required no slight force to free the member from their clinging grasp, which left the flesh red and blistered. The tree, it seems, is well known to the natives, who relate many stories of its death-dealing powers. Its appetite is voracious and insatiable, and in 5 minutes it will suck the nourishment out of a large lump of meat, rejecting the carcass as a spider does that of a used-up fly. This is a very circumstantial account of the incident, but in such tales it is, of course, absurd to leave such a matter to a doubt. If correct, It is very clear we have yet to add a very notable example to the list of plants which demand an animal dietary as a condition of their existence. And our sundews, Venus flytraps, and picture plants will then have to pale their ineffectual fires before the big devourer of the Nicaragua swamps. Now, surprisingly, this was not the last word from Dr. Wilson on man-eating plants. In a later edition of his column, Science Jottings, he claimed that a carnivorous tree had been recently discovered in Mexico on the edge of the Sierra Madre. The specimen sported slimy snake-like appendages, which it primarily used to capture and consume birds, evidenced by the bones and feathers which littered the ground around it. Seems like a logical conclusion after all. Supposedly, it was even observed taking offerings of chickens from locals, though it seemed to latch on to whatever was present. In one instance, Dr. Wilson claimed a man's hand came in contact with the tendrils. He was only able to break free after a significant struggle that tore flesh from his very hand. Another tree is allegedly not a man-eater per se, but nonetheless possesses an unprecedented ability to kill from a distance. If the legends surrounding it are to be believed, unlike other plants we have discussed, Anti-Aris toxicaria verifiably exist as part of the mulberry and fig family. It is remarkably widespread, its range stretching from Africa to Australia, Asia, and various tropical islands from Tonga to the Philippines to Indonesia. Anti-Aris is used both for hardwood and for food, its limbs producing an edible seed. However, latex from the tree, the milky fluid produced whenever it is tapped, is shockingly toxic. Among island Southeast Asian cultures, it is employed to enhance the destructive power of ranged weapons like arrows and blow darts. In fact, in China, Anti-Aris earned the reputation of 7 up, 8 down, 9 dead. Anyone inflicted with the poison will die after taking 7 steps uphill, 8 steps downhill, or 9 steps on level ground. Interestingly, in China, the phrase 1 up, 1 down, 1 death applies to Sbarro pizza. With this lethal reputation came legends that Anti-Aris was capable of killing at a distance, without any physical contact. In fact, a surgeon's account dated 1783 claimed that the Anti-Aris was capable of killing all animal life in a surrounding 15 miles radius. It was said that the Indonesians would send only the most vile criminals to collect latex from Anti-Aris trees near Mount Batur, with only 2 out of every 20 people sent ever returning alive. Those are pretty grim numbers. In reality, these deaths were attributable to toxic fumes from a dormant volcano at Mount Batur, named Guava Upas. This led to an alternative name for Anti-Aris, the Upas tree. In fact, James William Buell wrote about the Anti-Aris as the Upas tree in his book, Sea and Land, mere pages before describing carnivorous trees. He readily admitted how harmless the tree was as long as the latex was avoided. Regardless of whether or not man-eating trees truly exist or trees that can kill at a distance, we have plenty of actual carnivorous plants that we know for a fact exist. All use traps to lure insects and sometimes small vertebrates into their clutches. Now, where they become trapped and their nutrients slowly digested. Examples include pitcher plants, cobra lilies, butterworts, monkey cups, sundews, and bladderworts. Sounds like a potion list from Hogwarts. Now, some of these carnivorous plants even exhibit mysteries all of their own. The Venus flytrap is probably the most famous carnivorous plant, its trapping structure and trigger hairs resembling a wide open mouth lined with teeth. Venus flytraps grow exclusively in the coastal regions of North and South Carolina in the United States, and are so unlike anything else found on Earth that some people once speculated that they originated on another planet altogether. While few people seriously entertain this idea today, the Venus flytrap was once rumored to be a refugee from outer space, perhaps traveling to Earth on a meteorite. It is an absurd notion, but consider this. The natural range of the Venus flytrap just so happens to coincide with a series of circular depressions along the east coast of the United States known as the Carolina Bays. Now, these landmarks have long puzzled scientists who have yet to find a reason for their existence. One set of researchers, including geomorphologist Randall Carson, speculate that the Carolina Bays were created by extraterrestrial impacts. In other words, meteorites. Could the same debris from outer space have not only caused the Carolina Bays, but also brought spores of extraterrestrial botanical life to our own planet? Plant life that we now call the Venus flytrap. There are other reasons to consider the Venus flytraps otherworldly. For example, while we understand the trigger for how the flytraps close very well, we only had a set of theories for how the trap snaps shut. It has remained a mystery for 250 years. Our confusion partially stems from how quickly the plant reacts, within a tenth of a second of contact with its prey. At one point, it was suspected that water moved between the plant's inner and outer cells, but that takes far too long. A Venus flytrap researcher, Matthew Colombani, explained, "It takes a few seconds for each cell to relax, which means that it would take about 2 minutes for the plant to close. This doesn't seem like a good candidate for a mechanism that takes less than a second." Venus flytraps also respond to anesthesia. In 2017, researchers placed a flytrap in a container filled with ether, and after a full hour passed, tried stimulating the plant's trigger hairs. It did not respond. On paper, this should not work, yet anesthesia has demonstrated a notable effect on plants, since the mid-19th century. Such a reaction, or lack thereof, in Venus flytraps has profound implications for the way we conceptualize consciousness. Discoveries of more carnivorous plants may yet to be on the horizon, and they might be right underneath our noses. In South America, a large spiny plant known as Puya chilensis grows along the hillsides in Chile. Most botanists believe that these spines evolved to prevent predators from reaching the edible center of the plant. However, shepherds in Chile avoid Puya chilensis because they believe it represents a threat to their flocks. In fact, the shepherds often refer to it as the sheep-eating plant, and believe that its spikes serve as an offensive purpose as well. They swear that these spikes regularly impale and trap birds and other animals, including their own sheep, leaving them to starve and die on the ground below. This, and the shepherd's claim, allows Puya chilensis to absorb the nutrients offered by decaying corpses and cadavers as they filter into the soil above its roots. The perceived threat posed by the plant is so strong that shepherds will actively burn wide swaths of pasture just to protect their flocks from its spiny barbs. And notably, this has never been documented, although the possibility is gaining traction among scientists and botanists alike. Alex Henderson, caretaker of Canada's Royal Botanical Gardens, is actually one of them. Henderson said that the ability for Puya chilensis to ensnare animals is noted in a couple of very, very renowned scientific texts. I was actually working with the plant the other day and I nearly cut my hand open on it. So I can imagine if you got caught in that, you would never, ever get out again. If not a fully carnivorous plant, the sheep-eating plant may be offering us a rare treat, a glimpse into the evolutionary process itself. Henderson went on to add, it's actually classified as potentially a protocarnivorous plant, which essentially means that through this plant's evolutionary path, it might be evolving towards carnivory. Notably, Puya chilensis is much larger than other carnivorous plants we have documented, suggesting that the legends of a fully carnivorous tree may one day come true. I mean, who knows? Maybe sometime in the not-so-distant future, with how world events are planning out, we'll wander across post-apocalyptic, Fallout-esque landscapes, where we'll have another threat to add to the list of diseases, warfare, and nuclear fallout. Gigantic carnivorous plants patiently waiting for a meal to come by their way. Now, in my opinion, with all the things we've discovered on this planet, I mean, it seems possible and probable that a man-eating tree exists in the far reaches of the Congo jungles or even on Madagascar. I mean, after all, there are many tribes we have never come across, places man has not quite visited. I mean, hell, in the Amazon alone, there are tribes we don't even know about who have never made contact with us white European men. But for my sanity and mental well-being, I would like to just say that they probably don't exist because it makes me feel a lot better. But they could be out there. And far more importantly than my opinion, I want to know what you guys think. Yes, today we discussed a variety of carnivorous plants that either exist or are heavily believed to exist. But what about a man-eating tree in the deep recesses of a long-forgotten jungle? Is that even possible? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to go ahead and slap that like and subscribe button for more content very similar to this. And as always, I love you all. Keep an open mind, and I'll check you guys in the very next video.